To give you an example, in India, for example, when I came here, I said, hey, there's already a couple of established players here. Let me do something different, right? And for me, the something different was we started focusing on tier 2 cities. None of these guys were in tier 2 cities. So we went after tier 2 and even tier 3 cities, got a lot of clients there, got a lot of transporters there. So that, in a sense, created what I call a blue ocean, right? Where there's less competition and, stayed away from the red ocean where there was established players. So you got to think really hard. I mean, it's not an easy answer, but you really got to think hard on where can I create pockets of expertise or service where the big guys are not servicing.
Hello everyone, my name is Neil Patel and that is my special guest, Mudasar Mohamed, co-founder and COO of Ezyhaul. Ezyhaul is a logistics tech startup based in India, Singapore, Malaysia and Thailand. They're on a big mission to transform transportation logistics. So in this episode, he talks about how they validated the MVP by talking to experts and truck drivers. Talks about being very close to going bankrupt, but are now growing 300% in 2 years with 180 million in revenue. Talks about how they digitize the trucking process. Talks about how they use data, dashboards and analytics, APIs to improve decision making. Talks about 2 reasons why startups fail. Talks about why 3 is the magic number in founding a startup. Talks about what to look for in a co-founder and the qualities you need to be a chief operating officer. And finally, he talks about whether you, yes you, the listeners, should pursue entrepreneurship or stay in your 9-to-5 job. And much more. So please enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, Mudasar. Thank you for coming on the Indian Startup Show.
Thank you, Neil. Pleasure to be with you.
Awesome stuff. Please tell us what you're building.
Sure. So we are building Ezyhaul. Ezyhaul is South Asia's leading B2B road freight platform.
Yep.
What we do is essentially connect shippers, any large company like a Coca-Cola or Amazon that needs a truck. We connect them with transporters who have the capacity and want to take loads to increase their utilization. In addition to doing the connection, we also take ownership of the cargo from the pickup to delivery. So we take care of everything from A to Z till the cargo is delivered. We get the proof of delivery, and we provide various other value adds to our clients.
Great stuff. And how did you come up with the idea? What was the light bulb moment?
Yeah, look, me and my partner Raymond, we both were in the US for a long time working in logistics. And back in the US, there were these manual load boards where the brokers would put up literally right on a blackboard, okay, these are the shippers that need trucks and these are the transporters who are available. And they would manually start matching them, right? This is back in 2014, 2015 when we were there. And at the same time, Neil, as you know, the Uberization of the world took off, right? Yeah. So we saw an opportunity where, hey, there is a need to match demand and supply, and there are Uber-like models. But we didn't see too many Uber-like models in the logistics industry. And then we moved to Southeast Asia. So I was, fast forward 2 years later in 2016, Raymond and I were both in Southeast Asia. I was a managing director for a company called UTI Worldwide in Singapore, and Raymond was the managing director in Vietnam. And we got together and said, like, hey, we both about to lose our jobs. There was an M&A happening, and this company was taking over the company we were working for. And we said, all right, instead of looking for a new job, why don't we try a hand at entrepreneurship, and let's revisit that idea we had of connecting demand and supply using modern technologies, right? Yeah. So that was the genesis. We've been in logistics. We saw an opportunity, and we said, okay, in Southeast Asia, there is no startup in the space, or maybe there was just one or two. We saw an opportunity and started in Singapore in 2016.
Awesome. So sounds exciting, that. So what did the first MVP look like? Talk about that and the insights that you gained.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to validate your idea with the experts, right? Especially in a B2B environment. So we spoke to quite a few, senior executives in the industry and took the ideas on what the platform should look like. The first thing was the ease for the driver to use the app, right? So you got to imagine that a driver who drives a truck, especially in Southeast Asia and India, he's probably not the most educated guy, right? So we had to design the app in such a way that it was easy for him to follow. And similarly, on the shipper side, when they were making a booking, we also had to make it very easy for them, right? I mean, we don't want a cumbersome platform that, gives them double the time. So, we allow them to make a booking online. We could do API integrations with them, so we get the data automatically with them. So, yeah, we listen to the experts on the field and build the tech ground up. Of course, the first MVP was quite basic. We probably just had pickup and delivery, but over time we've added various features like multi-drop, multi-pickup, barcode scanning. Ordered a ton of other features over time. But the important thing is get started, right? Just start. I mean, you cannot perfect it from day one. Do something basic, get started, and then when you get started, you learn from your clients and your vendors on how you can improve.
How did you then go about validating that MVP?
Well, the validation happens on the scale of growth, right? I mean, if you're not growing, I think that goes back to probably your MVP not finding product market fit. So, especially at that time, there's the constant part of sitting with your clients. Back then I was on the road with truck drivers across Malaysia, showing them how the app works along with my colleagues, getting their feedback and continuously improving, right? And, slowly but surely our numbers did go up, and that in itself was a validation that we're heading the right direction.
What was that like on the road with the truck drivers?
It was beautiful. I mean, that's the reason you do a startup, right? I mean, you get off your golden perch and get down to the ground and, roll your sleeves up and, sit with them. And look, I come from India, from a middle class family. So, I was used to that life in any case, right? Just working with people across the country. And, so, yeah, I was very comfortable doing that. And, but my team that we hired, the first few guys, they were very supportive and kind of living that life and, just being on the ground rather than sitting in a swanky office, in a WeWork office with all the perks. That wasn't us. Us was on a roadside somewhere in Malaysia.
Getting your hands dirty, as they say.
Absolutely.
What questions did they ask you then?
So look, we have two parties in this transaction, right? So there's a transporter who is providing the truck. For him, the important thing is like, hey, when will I get paid? How will I get paid, and how will this improve my life, right? And we had answers to all of these problems, right? First of all, these guys typically get paid much later. Let's say they move a truck from A to B. Their client would pay them after like 15, 20, 30 days, right? And there would be a lot of back and forth in settling the payment because of the lack of data and lack of visibility on the shipment. But with us, given that we have visibility on where he is, he submits the proof of delivery and we pay him instantly, right? So that really solved one problem of his. Secondly was just the transparency. Like I said, because it's a digital trail on the shipments, we know exactly when he started, when he stopped. So if there's any overtime charges, all of that is validated easily, right? With freedom, right? I mean, these guys are not dedicated to us. They can drive for us and also have their other business. So we essentially became an additional marketing channel for them, right? We would bring them business and they're more than happy to take it. So that kind of answered all of those, value propositions for them. On the shipper side, so the shipper, like I said, is a large company like, let's say, Coca-Cola. For them, the question was like, hey, will it be as easy to book a truck? The answer was yes. We said you can send us the orders in multiple ways. We said we have a dedicated back-end customer service team. You can call 24/7 and we're there for you, which, by the way, is a real luxury in the transport industry. You might think that's a very basic thing, but trust me, transport is still stuck 30 years behind. And that's why companies like us have flourished, I guess. And the third question for them was, how else can you help us? And we said we not only provide you a truck, but we will provide you various analytics and dashboards that can, make you, help you make informed decisions for your business. Now, all of this was not offered by your normal transporter, right? And back in the day, if you just get your transporter, all you do is move your truck from A to B. I mean, forget about him picking up your phone, forget about getting reports and analytics. So basically, we took an industry that was still stuck back in the age and kind of, brought it into the technology age.
Why was it still stuck in the old age then?
Yeah, look, I think, similar to banking, a lot of the systems and transport were quite outdated. I don't know about the US, it's probably a different market, but at least in Southeast Asia, India, you also look at the driver community, like my earlier comment, they are probably not in the upper rungs of society, right? So these guys are typically low-wage earners, which also ties to their education and which also ties then to their ability to adopt to technologies, right? Whereas, of course, if you're in an investment bank, then or you're in a Google, you're obviously highly educated and you adapt to technologies. So just the people in the we were working with, probably not observant with such technologies, and then over time, of course, it's happening now with companies like us.
What went wrong in the early days then?
Look, I think there are a few things we can think back on, right? First of all, on the shipper side, initially the growth was quite slow. So we thought, okay, we start from day one. You're very optimistic as an entrepreneur. You expect okay, I'm going to get 100 bookings the next day. But the first 3 months, it was quite slow, right? And I think kind of didn't take into account the resistance to change, because you've got to imagine that these guys are so used to picking up the phone and calling their transporter, right? Hey, give me a truck. And just bringing that change about why they should use us and helping them understand the value proposition, that just took a bit of time, right? So I think in initial first 6 months, we probably didn't grow as fast as we thought we would. And that then has knock-on effects, right? Because then you question yourself, you question, hey, how much money do I have? How much do I need to raise? How much life do I have left? You question a lot of things, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you live through that fear, especially in the start. So that was that, and of course, finding good people is always tricky, especially attracting people to come work in trucking, right? I mean, if you tell somebody come work in high tech or investment banking, I'm sure you'll get 1,000 resumes. But trucking, like I said, in our parts of the world, it's not the quote unquote sexiest industry, right? So we probably would get less resumes compared to other startups. But again, over time, that has changed tremendously, and now logistics, I feel, is probably the hottest industry to be in globally.
We ever close to giving it up or running out of money?
I wouldn't say giving up, but there were some hairy moments. Like, for example, before we raised Series A, we were probably a week away from going bankrupt. And when I say bankrupt, I mean personally and professionally, right? Because we initially bootstrapped the company and put in all our savings. So, but we lived through those times, right? And now when we look back where we are today, you appreciate those moments more, right? Like, hey, I went through that, and you have to, right? I mean, if you want to be a startup or a founder or an entrepreneur, you really need to have the tenacity to kind of live through those days. So I wouldn't say we question the model, but it's just that it got a little hairy in the early days in terms of how much cash we had on hand and kind of balancing everything around it.
What was the specific breakthrough moment then?
We got a pretty large client, one of the largest 3PL companies in the world. So they became a client, right? And I think it's critical to get that really big account, especially in a B2B startup, that kind of, you get a snowball effect after that, right? Like initially we were talking to the small mom and pop companies that, hey, I need one truck to move my box of shoes that I produce, right, or my plastic buckets, whatever. So those are our initial set of clients. And then once we got this really large companies, and then using that we could go to other companies and say like, hey, X is with us, you need to get onto this curve, right, in technology adoption. That set the ball rolling. That was one. And also on the funding side, we got one early investor who was again a renowned guy in the industry to come on board in a seed round, and he put in $500,000 US, just trusting us, right? At that point, like I said, we still had little traction, but he came in and invested in our company. Bobby Tan, shout out to him. He's based in Indonesia and Singapore. So I think getting that trust from him and a few other guys who invested at that point was critical for us to kind of say, okay, we can now breathe and run for another 1 year, try to grow the business. And then once you grow, you have the numbers, the money comes, right? But you have to get to the point where you have enough stats to back up your story.
I want to talk about the technology. You mentioned analytics. How are you using all that to sort of grow the business? Can you share some insights? Examples of how you're using it, or perhaps how you're using the data, perhaps.
It's on two fronts, right? First of all, if you think about how we get the data from our shippers in terms of how many trucks they need, back in the day that was just over a phone call or email, right? Now we do full API integrations where the client can have an SAP system or any system. So we integrate with them, and then we seamlessly get all of their booking data, instantly. Once we have that data, then we need to plan the trucks for the next day, right? And that planning means that, okay, the client has this many kgs or this many metric cube of cargo. How many trucks do I need, right? And that can be a manual calculation or an algorithm that does it. We have an algorithmic way of doing it, right? So our system would then process that data and say, okay, for this volume of cargo, we need 7 trucks on this route, we need 4 trucks on this route, and this is the truck size, etc., right? So that's the optimization part. Once the optimization is done, we need to then send that information to our drivers who are going to come pick up the cargo, right? So that is then sent to the drivers on an app. The driver would see the route for the next day, the pickup to delivery. He also has additional features like barcode scanning, etc., take pictures of the proof of delivery. And all of that information is then relayed back to our client in real time through a reverse feed, right? So this value chain that I just described is a complete digitization of the trucking process, right? We've taken something that was completely manual and now something that's completely automated. Then secondly, we're also capturing all of this data on the back end, right? So we have a couple of smart data scientists who then, especially for our large accounts, are able to process this data and give various analytics to our clients and say like, hey, on this particular route, our trucks are stopping 3 hours on an average per day. Maybe you have a bottleneck in this warehouse, right? You got to look at it. Or, hey, you're spending X dollars on a certain truck type. If you move to this truck type, you might save 8% annually. So that's where our value comes in, right? Anybody can provide a truck. What we do is provide a truck, try to do it seamlessly, and then provide you analytics and data to kind of make your business run smoother. Now, this is the perfect example I gave you, right? We also have the not perfect examples where the clients are still extremely manually based, where they say, hey, I don't want any of that. You just help me with getting a truck, and I don't need to be bothered by anything else. And that's also fine. We also have clients who say that, especially small traders, SME companies, and our value proposition there is to help them, move the cargo from A to B in the quickest possible way.
Sounds very exciting in terms of the innovations, what's going on in the trucking business. Yeah,
it is. And like I said, this industry is really being hauled to the 21st century. That's where our name Ezyhaul also comes from. It's a play on hauling and haulage, etc.
Yeah. So you started in 2014. Can you share some updated stats then? How are things going in terms of traction?
Sure. We started in 2016. 2016 was when we incorporated. Look, we've been lucky with growth. As of today, we are present in 6 countries, Neil. We are in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and India. I would say we are probably the only company in this space that's multinational. If you look at most companies, they are only China or only India or only Malaysia, for example, but we've been able to expand to 6 countries in 5 years, which is something. Revenue this year, we're expecting about $180 million in revenue. We've grown 300% in the last 2 years. What else? 75,000 trucks on the platform across our countries. And the part that we're most proud of is that we've turned profitable at an EBIT level, right? Most startups, as you know, are loss making and burn cash, right? But given the founders and our background of running businesses sustainably, we said, look, we will not do business at a loss, right? We have to have some profit, and then that technology, the internal technology, helps in kind of keeping the costs down, and we don't need to hire 500 people to handle $180 million revenue, right? So we only have about less than 200 people operating across the countries and handling this kind of revenue. And you can only do that if your processes are solid. So more than achieving this $180, $200 million revenue that we're hitting, it's also the fact that we've done EBIT profitable, and we want to continue growing that way.
Great set of numbers there. So you nearly went bankrupt, and now you've got $180 million revenue. What do you think about that?
Well, it's good to think back to those days, right? And when I say bankrupt, it's just getting the funding. The first
Yeah.
funding is difficult, right? I mean, people need to kind of look at you, trust the numbers, etc. But once you have that, then, like I said, getting the funding is the easy part if you're hitting the numbers. And look, those kind of instances kind of keep you humble. We do not get carried away with things like valuations, etc. There's enough examples out there of companies that went to $50 billion and then went back to zero, right? So look, I mean, we'll continue building the startup, keep growing, and don't forget our roots, where we come from, and stay humble and keep growing the business. But it's good to have those experiences, and if I had a chance, I would do it all over again and live through those dark days as well.
So you wouldn't change anything then?
I wouldn't. Honestly, I wouldn't. I mean, of course, in hindsight, you could do a few things differently, but that's the good joy of riding this wave of a startup, right? It's the highs are incredibly high and the lows are also incredibly low, right? So you ride those wave of emotions, and that's why I say you need to have a strong stomach to survive over a long time in a startup.
But do you still consider yourself as a startup now? Because obviously you started with like
probably,
2 or 3 people. Now you've got 200 people now. So
probably not. I think that word is kind of probably misrepresents us where we are today with the scale and our coverage. So yeah, let's say we are a developing, mature business.
Why do you think most startups do fail then? Even the 15 million ones do.
Look, it's typically two things, right? Number one, I would say, is what is the service or product that you're offering, and is there a real need for it, right? Number one. And number two, how much do you need to spend in terms of resources or technology to bring that to a certain scale where, then make it profitable, right? So startups fail for two reasons. Number one, they just don't have product market fit, right? They brought a product to the market where nobody wants it, right? I mean, that's the most simple example. Number two, they brought a product to the market. People want it, but people do not want to pay what you're looking for, right? So in this case, startups might succeed for 3-4 years, get a high valuation, but at some point you've got to start turning profitable, right? And having the business being sustainable. If that doesn't happen, then those startups can also die, although that happens in a more elongated time frame than the first example. And in both examples, what's common is just the cash flow. I think cash flow is the oxygen of any business, and it's not for startups also, right? Any business, whether you're running a cafe in Paris or you're running a textile company in Gujarat or wherever, you need to have one eye on how much money you have left in the bank relative to how much revenue your company is bringing in, relative to how much you need to pay your staff and other operating expenses, right? So I think a lot of young entrepreneurs probably maybe they need a bit of coaching and training and help on that. Probably get a good finance guy in the team to help them manage the cash flow. So yeah, I would say it's one of these three things, Neil. And the common binding factor, which I'm sure you've heard 100 times, but is true, is the team behind the company, right? I mean, that goes without saying. End of the day, it's the team that makes a company succeed or fail.
What were the first impressions of your co-founders when you first met them then?
So I have two co-founders, Raymond and Nikki. The good thing was we were colleagues before we started Ezyhaul, right? So I was listening to a couple of your podcasts as preparation. You had Varun and Edul Patel and those guys on. And I heard some of the startups, the founders probably met the co-founders through a friend, and that's also fine. But I think it's even better if you have some history with your co-founders. So Raymond, for example, was my boss at one point. And Nikki was also working in the same company we were working on. So we had history. And then what do you look for in a co-founder? You look for intellect. You have to trust them. If not, it's never going to succeed. And the trust goes both ways, right? And they have some intellect, hopefully. And then you come together and create a plan around how you want to take the business off, right? So yeah, and I think again, most startup founders would tell you that the founding team is just so critical in the future success, right? So be very careful who you're founding the company with. I mean, I tell Raymond and Nikki sometimes that I probably hear and speak to them more often than I speak to my wife, but that's that's the life you live, and that's why you got to pick your co-founders very carefully.
That sounds like a marriage, that, doesn't it? But at the start, how did you go about defining the roles? Obviously, you got sales, marketing, tech, HR, etc., etc.
Yeah, great question. So look, and that's why you need, the advice I give to people is that try to have 3 co-founders in the team, right? I personally feel 3 is a good number. I mean, 1 is very tough, right? I really feel that a one-person company, the chances of success are low. Of course, you have crazy people like Elon Musk, but he's Elon Musk. But for the normal human being, you cannot do it. You cannot do everything by yourself. So we were 3 guys. So I took responsibility of operations, setting up the carrier side, getting carriers on board, setting up the operations processes, etc. Raymond took charge of technology and finance, and like I told you earlier how important the finance piece was. And Nikki took care of the sales part, right? So in a B2B company, those are your 4 major functions, right? You have operations, finance, sales, and technology. So we split those 4 among the 3 of us. But having said that, as a startup, as a young startup, everybody does everything. So of course I would also do sales, and then I also would recruit, which comes into the HR territory, and others would do it too. But at a high level, that's how we split it. And then, and then slowly but surely, you hire other people to kind of take on more specialist roles.
Because I speak to a lot of CEOs, but you're the COO, Chief Operating Officer. It's a role that pretty much goes under the radar. It's very internal, I suppose. How do you find that role as a COO? What kind of experience or what kind of strategies do you need to be a COO?
Yeah, but look, and if you look at the JD of a COO, it's very broad. I don't think you will find a standard definition. The way I look at it is basically you're a lieutenant to the CEO, right? Which is Raymond in our case. I mean, you have to be there for everything, right? Whether it's sales or operations or finance, investor relations. So at least in the initial days, Raymond and I were doing a lot of the external stuff on the investor side. Nikki was focusing on sales, for example. And then within that, the function of a CEO can be broad, right? Some CEOs, get into legal, they get into, sometimes they get into systems, processes, technology, all of that. In our company, like I said, my focus was on in initial days setting up the operations processes, getting the correct carriers on board. As we've matured as a company, and I'm now based in India, I am de facto the CEO of India, right? Because I take care of everything in India, right from sales to operations to HR, everything under the sun. And India is our largest market. It's about 60% of our revenue. So yeah, I think the definition is quite broad, and it really depends on you and your partner kind of defining it and having your responsibilities.
Who's helped you on your journey then?
Like I said, the few people that come to mind is, of course, the first dude who put in 500,000 when we didn't have much, right? I mean, you need that kind of trust and backing to launch a startup that's going to go big. I think without that, it would have been really difficult. And then when I was in the US, I spent about 12 years there studying and working. There was somebody in my family who's also been an entrepreneur, and then that kind of also was inspiration to me, right? I mean, I would see him and how hard he worked, and the advice he gave me that continues to be an inspiration. And then thirdly, my family was in business back in the day, right? Small business, but it was a business. And you will find that a lot of kids who grow up in a business family, they want to become entrepreneurs in the future, right? Because they've seen a taste of what that life is, the good and the bad. So yeah, I think those few things kind of festered in. And then, of course, like I said, you have to have an incredible support system. My wife, mother, everybody, especially the days where, like I told you, you're running out of cash and you don't know what the future holds. You need somebody to say, hey, it's okay. It doesn't matter, right? We'll just start from zero and go again. So that's incredibly important as well, to have some sanity.
In terms of the business then, like e-commerce must be huge for you. It must be amazing for your industry in general, really, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I think e-commerce has been a big contributing factor into why logistics startups are getting so much traction in the last few years, and will continue to do so over the next several years, right? I mean, just the compounded growth of e-commerce, especially in big countries like India, China, US, Europe, it's led to logistics companies like ourselves, right? Where you need efficiency, you need clarity, you need data, you need analytics. So they really have been at the forefront of this of this wave. And I think we're just getting started, right? We still the growth in the future. About 6 billion people in the world, half of them have still not come online. So you can imagine once that half comes online, there's going to be more products procured, more movements, more trade, more commerce, more trucks, right? So I think any company that's in the logistics space, and not only us, but any company in the logistics space, it is the right industry to be in over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, sounds exciting to me. What can go wrong then? Because obviously, you're the major players now, right?
Look, I think you have to, as a startup or rather as a maturing company, growth is paramount, right? So you cannot stop growing, number one. Number two, you need to have one eye on the future. So a lot of time as a company founder is, yes, you spend it in the present in taking care of your sales and operations and finance and whatnot, but you have to have an eye on what are the trends and what else is happening, right? And you have to try to catch up. I mean, if you don't, then tomorrow there's going to be a new startup that's going to come and disrupt us and leave us behind. And hence I told you earlier that you just cannot take success for granted, right? Or be like, hey, we had 180 million, all right, let me rest now. There is no rest, right? So you got to keep growing. You got to grow sustainably, and of course you've got to keep an eye on competition and what are the trends out there, and keep adapting to what the client needs. If you decay there in terms of not having an offering that client needs, then there will be other companies that come take your place, and you will slowly die.
So talk about how you set up the Indian market then, because obviously you set up in Singapore and other countries. Did you use like the same playbook that you used in those countries?
In some ways, yes. Look, we are a two-sided model, right? We have a demand and supply side. So I think the golden rule in a two-sided model is you typically set up the supply first. And supply side for us is transporters. When I came to India in 2018, I still remember this picture of me and my first hire here, just an empty office and 2 computers, right? And that's what you start from. If you're a successful company, when you enter a new country, you're still starting from zero, right? So what we did was we created a strategy where we said, okay, let's focus on two cities only, right? And for us, it was Bangalore and Delhi. And we said, let's sign up transporters just in these 2 cities. And the reason I chose these 2 cities was, Delhi's in the north, Bangalore's in the south. I thought, okay, we can then start doing long intercity trucking between these 2 cities, right? So we have a truck going from A to B, and then he can go back from B to A, right? So I think the key to startup is, first of all, have focus on one side of the model. And for us, it was the supply side, explaining to transporters on why they should sign up with us, what is the value proposition to them, creating a use case for that. And then once you have that, you then go to your demand and try to sign up your shippers. The advantage we had was that we were already working with some large corporations like Coca-Cola, etc., in Malaysia, so we could then get references to their India team, right? So that certainly helped us, where we said, if you walk in cold, it's tougher to get a business, but if you tell them like, hey, we already work with you in a different country, they would at least have a chat with you. So, and it grows from there, right? I mean, we first started with 20 trucks, and then by the 3rd month, we had 100 trucks, and you slowly scale that up over time. And then in parallel, you also scale up your team over time. I mean, it's not like you enter here and in the first month, you have 100 people. We only had 5 people. Then by the 6th month, we had 30 people and so on, right? So your growth as a team has to pace with your growth as a business, right? If you don't, then again, you still run into the issues of cash flow and spending too much, etc. So yeah, to answer your question, have a specific plan that we will start in this geography, in this city, focus on what's going to make you successful and what is critical for us. The critical part was we needed to get enough transporters on the platform, and then start slowly making incremental improvements from there. And today, 2.5 years fast forward, we are present in almost 26 states in India, all across all of India, and like I said, about 60% of this $180 million comes from the Indian market.
So you got more than 2 computers now?
We do. We can finally afford it. However, having said that, we don't take pride in hiring too many people. I think that's also a sign that you're not growing sustainably, right? So we actually take pride in when we say like, hey, we haven't hired too many people relative to our increase in business. So that's also important.
What is your hiring process then? Do you go for high achievers or people who are specialists or all-rounders?
Well, look, it depends on the role. A couple of things that I try to look for is analytical skills. How do you test that? I mean, they either have an engineering background or they've done something in their previous work that shows that they have an analytical bent of mind, right? We would also sometimes give them some data sets to kind of analyze and, come back with some analysis on what they think of a large data set. So those things can be easily tested, right? And it's important to have analytical skills because we're working with data and volume all the time, right? So it's good to have somebody who can kind of make sense of the madness. Right, and the analytical skills help. Second thing that I try to look for is, have we done something entrepreneurial, right? And what I mean by that is not necessarily started a company. They could have been working in a large corporation, but what did you do in that company that nobody else did, right? Did you go up to your boss and suggested, hey, I want to do this project. I think it's going to make us more money. Or I want to do this project because it's going to shave 5% of our cost, right? So I'm looking for those kind of examples where somebody's taken the initiative on their own and executed a project, right? So that's what I mean by having entrepreneurial mindset. And then, of course, if they built their own company, that's fantastic, right? That's the best option. But in the absence of that, we look at entrepreneurial initiatives that may have taken. And then, of course, then there's the functional expertise, right? If you have tech, of course, you got to probably be good in coding. If you're in finance, you got to be good with P&L, et cetera, right? But, being analytical, being entrepreneurial, and just being a good team player, I guess, is something that I look for.
Because obviously you have a lot of listeners who are, probably working at a global company and are thinking about pursuing entrepreneurship. Obviously, you left your job, unfortunately, and then you decided to do entrepreneurship. But sort of, how do you decide whether to pursue entrepreneurship or stay at your career at a global company?
Look, what I tell others is either option is absolutely fine, right? I mean, if you're in a large company and you're doing well and you're happy, hey, do that, right? I mean, it's not, you don't have to become an entrepreneur first of all, but if you do, I can tell you it's the most rewarding experience you will ever have, right? Now, the answer on why and how you should do it, like I said, depends on your conviction on three things. Number one, what is the idea, right? And what has the idea, have you validated the idea at least with a few experts in that industry? And I don't mean asking your mom or your wife about it because they will try to encourage you, but especially in the B2B industry, talk to people in that industry and say what they think about the idea, right? People you trust and get honest feedback. I think that's one test for that. Number two, like I said, do you have people to do this business with? If you're going to do it alone, hey, that's going to be a really rough ride. But if you have a couple of people who are also keen on this idea, that's a second checklist for me, right? And thirdly, I think they need to assess what is their financial health at that point in their life. And I say that because if you form a company like we did, you've got to forget about drawing a salary for a year or two, right? I mean, you cannot, form a company and then draw money out of it from day one. That just doesn't make sense. Every dollar is important and every dollar should go towards growth. So can you forego an income for a year, for example? So I think that's a personal decision people need to make, that are they comfortable doing that, right? So in my view, if your answer to those 3 points is yes, then hey, go for it. You will either succeed or you will learn one of them.
Last few questions then. What are you working on right now then?
For us, it's all about expansion. I mean, we reach a stage where, okay, we're 5 years out. We are in 6 countries. What's next? We still are not in some of the larger markets, right? I mean, there's the whole, there's China, there's, more countries in Southeast Asia, there's also Australia. So we're always looking to expand internationally. Number two, continue growing in our existing markets. Like I said, if we stop growing, then the business will die over a period of time. And number three, in my personal view, it'll be great to go public, right, in a couple of years, 2 to 3 years. I think that's our goal, at least the founders share, is that, we want to be there standing in a stock exchange and taking this company public, right? But to get to that point, I mean, you obviously need to mature as a business, have very mature processes, etc. So I think that's probably a goal. Take care of existing markets, identify new markets to enter, and number three, work towards a larger goal of perhaps going public someday.
Is there any sort of books or blogs or perhaps YouTube videos that you want to recommend to our listeners that have helped you in your business? Anything that's helped?
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of podcasts, I listen to A to Z. That's Andreessen Horowitz. They're a VC, but they have a bunch of good shows on how to deal with problems. Etc. In terms of books, there's a couple that come to mind. I really loved Shoe Dog, the founder of Nike. Incredible book. There's another book called High Output Management by Andy Grove. He was the founder of Intel, and a lot of startup founders rave about that book. And I was like, okay, I got to read it. And then when I read it, I was like, okay, this is like a management manual in 200 pages, right? Everything from how to hire, how to think about expanding, everything, right? So that's a fantastic book as well. And then in terms of fiction, I don't read too much fiction, but back in the day, I think Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead really had an impact on me. I read it when I was 21, and there was something about that character, Howard Rock, that kind of instilled this feeling of taking a stand, being principled, going for your goals, etc. So I think those are a few books that come to my mind. I also listen to Jim Cramer's podcast. There's Mad Money, and then he does another show on CNBC. That's good, kind of to keep abreast of the macroeconomic conditions in the world. He has a lot of CEOs on his shows, so that also gives you a good perspective. Chamath, I follow him on Twitter. Chamath is again a VC based in the US, ex-Facebook, brilliant guy, a lot of good insights.
What advice would you give to our first-time founders then? What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, I think it's just those three things I said, right? Number one, your product, your idea, get it validated, right? Talk to a few experts, who know that industry. Don't do it alone. It's very tough to succeed alone. Try to get in my view, 3 is a perfect number. And have somebody who's good in finance too, who can keep an eye on your cash flow, right? Because cash flow is so important for your business. And lastly, be extremely tenacious, right? I mean, this is not a journey that's easy, but like every founder says, you don't really fail being a founder, right? I mean, there's so much to learn. You either make money out of it or you make experience and memories that will last you a lifetime out of it, right? That's what I would say.
But what about those startups who are in an industry where it's people with lots of money, lots of credibility, lots of staff, the big boys? For example, when you started, you must have been against established industry players, right? How did you overcome those odds, as it were?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to understand how big your industry is. For example, the trucking industry in India is about $180 billion, right? And no player has greater than a 1% market share. Yes, there could be big players in that industry, but you got to assess is that industry fully served, or is there a way to get in? I mean, if you want to create a startup in social media, for example, I mean, Facebook is there's Twitter, etc., right? So I mean, it's going to take a lot for you to overcome those kind of startups, but perhaps you can do something more specialized that's not being catered for. But in terms of other industries, I think the pie is big enough where there's a couple of big sharks, and there are in almost every industry. I think you can still create a space for yourself, given how big that industry is, and maybe there are markets that haven't been served, or there's client segments that haven't been served, right? To give you an example, in India, for example, when I came here, I said, hey, there's already a couple of established players here. Let me do something different, right? And for me, the something different was we started focusing on tier 2 cities. None of these guys were in tier 2 cities. So we went after tier 2 and in tier 3 cities, got a lot of clients there, got a lot of transporters there. So that, in a sense, created what I call a blue ocean, right? Where there's less competition and, stayed away from the red ocean where there was established players. So you got to think really hard. I mean, it's not an easy answer, but you really got to think hard on where can I create pockets of expertise or service where the big guys are not servicing, and try to identify those and go after that.
Has anything surprised you about your entrepreneurial journey so far?
Let me see. In terms of surprises, I guess it just everybody probably underestimates the emotional side of things. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on mental health nowadays, and that's true, right? Like I say, reality will hit you as an entrepreneur at some point where you feel like, hey, you're running out of money, or you're not getting any clients, or you have people who have quit, and so I guess, and I've known people who probably haven't dealt with that part as well as some other people, right? And that's what we've been kind of lucky to not go through very hard times, but there's a lot of people who have, right? So I would say you just have to take care of that and have a really good support system around you, and do not underestimate the mental fortitude and mental strength you need to kind of see you through a long period of time.
Right, last question. For people who want more information on Ezyhaul, what must they do?
Please go to www.ezyhaul.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're in India or Southeast Asia, please write to me if there's any way we can help you, either sign you up as a transporter or help you move your cargo in a more efficient and digital way. We'll be more than happy to talk to you.
What's the weirdest thing you've transported then?
Funny, we once transported fruit in Malaysia, and I think it was like avocados or something, and it just went bad en route, right? It was really hot in the summer. When our staff was there at the unloading point, the client refused to unload it, and they said there's probably some dead animal or something in there. But it was just it had become so bad, the fruit. Yeah, we had to like kind of fumigate the truck and all of that, and get the experts in to unload it. And then it's not the other example I can think of is it's not so much what we transported, but in our early days, you need to load the truck, right? When in the client's warehouse, the truck needs to be loaded, and that's typically done by the client's warehouse staff. That day, for some reason, the warehouse staff didn't show up. So two of my colleagues, these young boys, went there, rolled up their sleeves, and they loaded the entire truck with their bare hands themselves, right? And I'm talking about a 40-foot truck. And of course, I went there to kind of stand by them and help them out as well. It's those moments that kind of stay with you, and and kind of the team that you build that buys into that philosophy that we will get this done at all cost, right? So that was a really good example I just thought of.
Awesome. Mudasar, thank you for coming on the Indian Startup Show today. Much appreciated.
I really appreciate your time, Neil.
Awesome stuff. I wish you all the best. Thanks to Mudasar for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. So check out ezyhaul.com for more information. Thanks for supporting the podcast, and I shall be back next week. And if you're building something exciting, please do get in touch and let's connect on Twitter at Indian Startup SH. If you're on Facebook, go to facebook.com/Indian Startup Show. Love to connect. Thank you and goodbye.